I used to believe that loyalty meant something. That if you gave your heart, your time, and your years to a place, they'd see you as more than just another worker. I was wrong. I started working at Bennett Industries when I was just 23 years old. Back then, the company wasn't even called Bennett Industries. It was a cramped little office downtown with creaky floors, flickering lights, and a few broken desks. But it had heart. We were a small team, and every success felt personal. When we landed our first big client, we stayed up all night, sitting on the office floor, eating cheap pizza and laughing about how we were going to make it big. I still remember the feeling, that buzz of excitement, like anything was possible. I worked day and night, pushing through when everyone else said we didn't have a chance. I skipped family vacations, I missed birthdays, anniversaries, even funerals, because deadlines didn't wait. And when the company grew, when it finally got the shiny new building and the expensive leather chairs, I thought we all grew together. I thought we were a family. Over the years, I mentored dozens of new hires. I stayed late to train them, listened when they needed advice, covered their mistakes when they messed up. I did it because I cared, not just about the job, but about the people. They used to call me The Rock. Whenever something went wrong, people came to me first. Even the CEO, Mr. Bennett himself, once said during a meeting, "If David leaves, we all fall apart." I carried that pride in my chest like a badge of honor. I wasn't just an employee, I was part of the foundation. So when they called me into that meeting room on a Tuesday morning, I wasn't worried. I figured it was about the new project proposal I submitted last week. Or maybe, deep down, I thought they were finally recognizing all the sacrifices I had made. I straightened my tie, brushed a hand through my graying hair, and walked in with a smile. But the moment I stepped through the door, something felt wrong. The air was heavy, people avoided meeting my eyes. And sitting in my chair at my desk was a kid who looked like he barely graduated college, typing away on my laptop like he owned the place. I stood there for a second, confused. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe he was just setting something up. Mr. Clark, the new CEO, a man I had watched climb the ranks, a man I had mentored once upon a time, cleared his throat. "David, please, sit down." I did, still trying to keep my face calm, my heart steady. But inside it felt like 1,000 alarms were going off. He didn't waste time. No warm greetings, no thank you for everything you've done. Instead, he pushed a thin envelope across the table toward me. "We've decided to move in a new direction," he said. His voice was cold, practiced, like he had rehearsed this moment 100 times. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a termination letter, effective immediately. No notice, no farewell party, no speech about my contributions, just a line about changing company needs and realigning with new goals. I looked up, feeling like the room was spinning. "After 25 years?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Clark didn't flinch. "You've been great, David, truly. But times are changing. We need people who can adapt faster, who bring fresh energy." He didn't say it outright, but I heard the words between the lines. Old, slow, replaceable. I sat there, stunned, as he droned on about severance packages and best wishes for your future endeavors. I couldn't hear half of what he said. My ears were ringing. My chest ached like something was being torn out of it. 25 years, sacrificed, thrown away like trash. And then, as if the humiliation wasn't enough, he smiled, that fake corporate smile, and gestured toward the kid at my desk. "This is Ethan," Clark said. "He's our new project manager. Fresh ideas, fresh outlook. We're really excited about the energy he's bringing in." I stared at the kid, Ethan, who probably didn't know half the things I had forgotten over the years, who hadn't bled for this place, who hadn't stayed late nights, fixing problems no one else could even understand. But it didn't matter, not anymore. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every year they suddenly decided I carried. I didn't yell, I didn't curse, I just nodded once, pocketed the letter, and walked out. Nobody stopped me, nobody thanked me, nobody even looked my way. As I passed the rows of cubicles, I saw faces turn away. People I had mentored, people I had defended. They all looked through me like I was a ghost. I walked out of Bennett Industries for the last time with nothing but a folder in my hand and a storm raging inside my chest. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could call me old and useless, and that I would just disappear quietly. They had no idea who they were messing with, because I knew something they didn't. something that would make them regret the day they tossed me aside. And I was going to make damn sure they learned that lesson the hard way. The days that followed felt like I was living someone else's life. I would wake up at 6 in the morning, just like always, get dressed, tie my shoes, then stand by the door not knowing where to go. For 25 years, every morning had a purpose. Now there was just silence. My wife, Ellen, tried to be supportive. She made extra coffee, left little notes on the counter telling me how proud she was of me. But I could see it in her eyes too. That quiet worry she didn't want to say out loud. "What are you going to do now?" she finally asked one night, her voice soft, like she was afraid of the answer. I didn't know. I just shook my head and stared at my hands. They looked older than I remembered, more wrinkled, more tired. The truth was, part of me wanted to crawl into bed and never get up. Just let the bitterness swallow me whole, just become what they said I was, old, slow, irrelevant. But another part of me, the part that had built that company from nothing, the part that stayed late fixing problems no one else could solve, that part was angry, no, furious. I didn't give my life to that place just to be forgotten. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let some overconfident kid and a backstabbing CEO erase everything I had done. So I started digging. Late at night, when Ellen was asleep, I pulled out my old files, stacks of contracts, internal memos, meeting notes I had kept over the years. At first, I didn't even know what I was looking for, maybe a thread I could pull, maybe just something to remind myself I had mattered. But then, I found it. A folder buried at the bottom of an old filing box, labeled only with a date from 8 years ago. I opened it, and my heart stopped. Inside were documents from a merger deal, one of the biggest ones Bennett Industries had ever pulled off. I remembered working on it like it was yesterday. Late nights, endless paperwork, phone calls that stretched into the early hours of the morning, but these documents, they weren't right. There were discrepancies. Numbers that didn't add up. Signatures that looked strange. And then I remembered, back then there had been rumors. Whispers about shady dealings to close the merger faster. Backroom conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. At the time I brushed it off. I trusted them. I thought, no, not Mr. Bennett, not my company. But the papers in my hand told a different story. Bennett Industries hadn't just bent the rules during that merger, they had broken them. If the authorities knew about this, if the shareholders knew, if the media knew, it would destroy them. And the best part? I had proof, real proof, not just rumors, not just stories, signed documents, email trails, even handwritten notes mentioning creative accounting and pushing approval through. I sat there, staring at the papers, feeling a rush of emotions so strong it almost knocked me over. Anger, hurt, betrayal, but also something else, power. For the first time in weeks I felt alive. I wasn't just some washed-up old man, I wasn't useless, I wasn't forgotten, I was holding their future in my hands. And they had no idea. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Part of me wanted to march back into that office the next morning, slam the documents on Clark's desk, and watch him squirm. But another part of me, the smarter part, knew that revenge was best served slow. They had humiliated me quietly, discreetly, trying to make me disappear without a scene. I was going to do the opposite. I was going to bring them down so loudly, so publicly, that they'd never recover. But I had to be smart. I had to be careful, because if they realized what I had, if they tried to bury it, spin it, hide it, I would lose my only leverage. I needed a plan, a real one, not just anger, not just a burst of pride, a plan that would hit them where it hurt the most, their reputation, their money, their future. I spent the next few days building it. I started small. Anonymous tips to a couple of reporters I trusted, people who still remembered me, who owed me favors from way back. I didn't give them everything yet, just enough to get them interested, to make them start sniffing around. Then I contacted a former colleague, Maria, who had left the company 2 years earlier after a falling out with Clark. I knew she still had a grudge. And more importantly, I knew she had access to even more buried skeletons. When I called her, she picked up after one ring. "David," she said, her voice sharp with surprise. "Yeah," I said. "It's time." I could almost hear her smile through the phone. Over the next few weeks, we built a case, piece by piece, document by document, fact by fact. Every late night I spent alone, reading contracts and connecting dots. Every betrayal I uncovered fueled the fire inside me. I wasn't just getting revenge anymore. I was taking back my dignity, my worth, my legacy. They thought I was old. They thought I was done. They had no idea that experience is a weapon they had handed me themselves when they betrayed me. And soon, very soon, they were going to feel just how sharp it could be. The walls of my home office became my war room. Every surface was covered in papers, emails, sticky notes filled with connections, timelines, names, and amounts. Every night after Ellen went to sleep, I would sit there for hours, piecing together the puzzle. It wasn't just the merger from 8 years ago. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Hidden in plain sight were a dozen more deals just like it. Cooked books, bribed officials, deals signed under fake subsidiaries to avoid taxes. And Clark, the man who had sat across from me for all those years, smiling like a friend. He wasn't just complicit, he was leading it. He built his whole career on lies, on fraud, on pretending to be the golden boy while standing on the broken backs of everyone who trusted him, including me. It was personal now. It wasn't just about me getting fired. It was about every honest person who gave their blood and sweat to that company, believing it stood for something better. It was about the 25 years I spent there, missing dinners, missing birthdays, missing life, because I believed in something that was never real, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Still, part of me hesitated. I thought about the other employees. Good people. People with families who depended on those paychecks. If I blew this whole thing open, would they suffer too? Would innocent people lose their jobs because of the corruption at the top? The thought gnawed at me. But then I remembered the way Clark had looked at me that day. The way he had shrugged, like I was an old piece of furniture he didn't need anymore. The way he had smiled, as if firing me was nothing more than taking out the trash. He hadn't thought twice about destroying me. He wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone else if it helped him. And that's when I realized the real damage had already been done. The rot was in the walls. Covering it up wouldn't save anyone. It would only let it spread. I had to tear it down, even if it hurt. Even if it meant sacrifices, because some things were worth fighting for. I reached out to my network. Old friends from the finance world, a few retired journalists, even an ex-SEC agent who owed me a favor. Quietly, we built a coalition. Every day the evidence grew stronger. Every day the noose tightened. The first blow came quietly. A small article in a mid-level business journal, just a whisper of potential irregularities at Bennett Industries. Barely a ripple, but then came the second piece, and the third. Within a month, the story had made it to national news. Reporters camped outside their headquarters. Stockholders demanded emergency meetings. The board of directors, once Clark's loyal puppets, started to distance themselves. Clark tried to fight back, held press conferences, gave interviews full of fake smiles and hollow reassurances, but it was too late. I had made sure of it. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and then, the final blow. I had been saving the best for last. The document that tied Clark directly to an off-the-books payment to a foreign official to secure a major contract. It was federal prison-level bad, and I made sure it got into the right hands. Watching the live news coverage the day Clark was arrested, it didn't feel like victory, not at first. It felt heavy, like I was carrying the weight of 25 years on my shoulders. I saw Clark being led away in handcuffs, his perfect hair messed up, his face pale. For a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I thought about the way he had called me old, lazy, irrelevant. I thought about how easily he had thrown me away, and the guilt disappeared. He had built his empire on lies. I had just shined a light on them. Still, even after everything, there was no celebration, no grand speech, no parade. Just a quiet moment, sitting alone in my living room, watching the sun rise after a long night, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I hadn't just gotten revenge. I had gotten my self-respect back. The man they thought was too old, too slow, too weak. He had been strong enough to take them all down. And now the world would remember, not Clark, not the young hotshots who thought they knew everything, but me, David, The man who didn't give up. The man who remembered. And the man who made them all pay. The dust hadn't even settled yet when I realized my fight wasn't over. Shaw Clarke was gone. His empire crumbled faster than anyone expected. Bennett Industries filed for bankruptcy just 3 months after his arrest. But me? I was still just a man who had been tossed aside. No job, no income, no purpose. At 57 years old, I was standing at the bottom of a mountain I had already climbed once. Only now, the climb seemed steeper and my legs didn't feel as strong. The people I thought might reach out, old colleagues, friends I had mentored for years, they disappeared. My phone, once buzzing with messages and calls every hour, stayed silent. It was like I had died and nobody had the courage to attend my funeral. Ellen saw it too. She tried to keep my spirits up, tried to tell me how proud she was, how what I did had mattered. But pride doesn't pay bills. Pride doesn't fill the long, empty days. There were mornings I'd sit at the kitchen table for hours, staring at the same coffee cup, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. The world didn't want old men like me anymore. I wasn't shiny or fast or trendy. I was just James. A man whose greatest accomplishment had been torn down along with everything else. I tried applying for jobs, swallowing my pride, willing to start over anywhere, but everywhere I went, it was the same story. We're looking for someone with a fresher outlook. We appreciate your experience, but we need more energy. You're just overqualified. Overqualified. What a polite way of saying too old. It burned. Every rejection, every polite smile, every door closed in my face. It chipped away at me. For the first time in my life, I started to believe them. Maybe I was done. Maybe I really didn't have anything left to offer. One night, after another long day of nothing, I sat outside on the back porch. The stars were out, the air cool against my skin. Ellen came out and sat beside me, handing me a cup of tea. She didn't say anything, just sat there, her hand finding mine in the dark. After a long silence, I finally spoke. "I think they were right," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I am just used up." She squeezed my hand tighter. "James," she said, her voice trembling, "you built something amazing, not just a company, not just a career. You built a life. You gave people opportunities, hope, a future. That doesn't just disappear because some fools couldn't see it." I turned to look at her, the woman who had stood by me through every storm. "They made you feel small," she said, tears shining in her eyes. "But you're not small. You're the biggest man I've ever known." I broke down then. Right there, under the stars, I cried like a child. Not because I was weak, but because I realized I had been carrying all that pain alone, and I didn't have to anymore. After that night, something changed in me. Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild. Not for revenge, not for pride, for me. For the man I knew I still was. I started consulting, offering my experience to small businesses that couldn't afford big firms, but needed someone who understood the real world, not just the theory. The first client was a tiny family-run bakery struggling to keep up with their finances. They were scared, overwhelmed, drowning. I sat with them for hours, going over their books, explaining things in simple ways, giving them tools to survive. And when they turned things around, when they hugged me with tears in their eyes, thanking me for saving their dream, that's when I realized this was my new purpose. Not building empires for greedy CEOs, not chasing status, but helping real people, people who worked hard, people who believed. Word spread, slowly at first, then faster. I never made millions again, but I made something better. Respect, purpose, peace. Looking back now, I see it clearly. Clarke and all those like him, they thought winning was about money, power, control, but real winning? It's about living a life you can be proud of. It's about leaving the world better than you found it. And by that measure, I had already won. They couldn't take that away from me. Not ever. I wish I could say things stayed easy after that. But life had more battles waiting for me. A few months into my consulting work, I got a letter. Thick, heavy envelope. No return address. When I opened it, my hands froze. It was from the new CEO of what was left of Bennett Industries. They were begging me to come back. not to rebuild the company. That was beyond saving, but to help them survive the lawsuits, the debts, the collapsing trust. Apparently, after Clark's downfall, the company's reputation was in ruins. Investors pulled out, clients cancelled contracts. Nobody wanted to do business with a company whose leadership had turned toxic. They thought maybe, just maybe, bringing back the old legend, the man who had built Bennett Industries, would save them. The irony wasn't lost on me. They threw me away like garbage when they thought I was too old, too slow. Now they were crawling back, desperate for the wisdom they once mocked. I showed the letter to Ellen that night. She read it carefully, then looked at me. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure myself. Part of me, the old part, the angry part, wanted to walk back in there, sit across from those smug faces and watch them squirm. Another part of me, the tired part, wondered if it was even worth it. They didn't deserve my help. They didn't deserve another second of my life. But the thought of stepping back into that world, to have even a shred of control over my legacy, it pulled at me. "I don't know," I finally said. "I don't know if I can do it without losing myself again." Ellen reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "You don't owe them anything," she said softly. "But if you choose to go back, do it on your terms, not theirs." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the years I had given to that place, all the late nights, all the sacrifices, all the birthdays and anniversaries missed. And for what? A pat on the back, a gold watch, a stab in the back the moment I showed a wrinkle? Number. If I was going to walk through those doors again, it wouldn't be as a desperate man begging for a job. It would be as a man who knew his worth. The next morning, I wrote them a letter, short, clear. No apologies, no explanations. I told them I would consider consulting, from a distance, strictly advisory, at 3 times my old salary, paid up front, and only if they agreed, in writing, to publicly acknowledge my contributions to the company's foundation and success. No tricks, no hidden agendas. I hit send and didn't look back. Days passed with no response. I didn't care. I was too busy helping real businesses, real people, to waste time worrying about some crumbling empire. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was the new CEO herself. Her voice was shaky, almost pleading. They agreed to all my terms, every single one. I wish I could say I felt victorious, but honestly, I just felt sad. Sad for them, sad for the company I once loved, sad for the man I used to be, the man who believed loyalty was a two-way street. I agreed to a few video meetings, laid out a basic survival plan. I didn't sugarcoat anything. "You need to rebuild trust," I said flatly during one meeting. "And that starts by admitting your failures publicly. No half-truths, no blaming the media." Some of the board members winced at my words. Good, let them squirm. I didn't stay long, just enough to set them on the right path, if they chose to take it. After that, I walked away for good. I never set foot inside their building again. I never answered another call from them. And when I finally saw the public statement they released, admitting the company's wrongs, praising the vision and leadership of James Caldwell in building the true heart of Bennett Industries, I didn't feel pride, I felt peace. They had tried to erase me, and in the end, they had to acknowledge the truth, on my terms, in my time. Not because I begged, not because I fought, but because they needed to, because the truth, no matter how hard they tried to bury it, had a way of rising to the surface. And with that, I closed the chapter, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the quiet strength of a man who knew he had survived the worst, and still had something left to give. Even after walking away from Bennett Industries for good, the memories stayed with me longer than I thought they would. Some nights I'd sit out on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun dip behind the trees, and wonder how things could have been different, how life could have looked if they had valued loyalty the way I did. If they had seen beyond the wrinkles and grey hair and noticed the heart that had never stopped beating for that company. But wishing never changed the past. I had to remind myself of that more times than I care to admit. One evening, a familiar name popped up on my phone. It was Marcus, one of the younger guys who used to work under me at Bennett Industries. Bright kid, hard-working, the kind who stayed late to help clean up messes other people left behind. I hadn't heard from him in years. I picked up, curious. "James," he said, sounding almost embarrassed. "I wasn't sure if you'd even remember me." I chuckled. "Course I do, Marcus. You were one of the good ones." He let out a breath, like he'd been holding it. I left Bennett," he said quickly. "It's a mess there now, toxic. Nobody trusts anyone. They're losing clients left and right." I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the stars beginning to dot the sky. "I'm not surprised," I said. There was a pause, then softly, "I started my own company." That caught my attention. "Really?" "Yeah," he said, a little pride in his voice now. "I learned a lot from you about how to lead with honesty, how to build something real." I didn't say anything right away, just listened. I was wondering," he said nervously, "if you'd consider advising us. Nothing big. Just your wisdom, your eye for things." "I could really use someone like you." For a moment I felt something warm stir in my chest. Not pride, not ego, hope. The kind of hope you feel when you realize that maybe, just maybe, the good you poured into the world didn't die when someone slammed a door in your face. It had taken root. In people like Marcus. In the next generation. I smiled. "I'd be honored," I said. That was the beginning of something new for me. Advising small companies, helping young leaders find their way without losing their souls. Teaching them that success didn't have to come at the cost of humanity. It wasn't glamorous work, no big headlines, no awards, but it was real, it was honest. And every time I saw one of those companies thrive, or not just financially, but morally, it felt like a little piece of me was being restored. I realized something important during those months. It wasn't the building, the office, the title that made my work meaningful. It was the impact, the way you made people feel, the values you left behind, the quiet influence that lasted longer than any paycheck. The world had tried to tell me I was too old, too slow, too irrelevant. But the truth was, the world needed people like me more than ever. Not to chase trends, not to climb ladders, but to remind everyone what really mattered. One evening, I got a package delivered to my door. No return address again. I opened it and found a plaque inside. Simple, elegant. It read, "James Caldwell, the man who built dreams, not just businesses." There was a note tucked inside, no signature, just 5 words. "Thank you for believing first." I sat there, holding that plaque, and for the first time in a long time, I felt tears well in my eyes, not from sadness, but from something deeper, gratitude. Life had taken a lot from me, but it had given me something too, a legacy I could be proud of, not because of what I'd built with my hands, but because of what I had built in people's hearts, and that could never be taken away. Life started feeling lighter again. It wasn't that the pain disappeared. It's just that I found a new way to carry it. Helping Marcus and a few other young leaders had given me purpose again, a reason to get out of bed with something more than bitterness in my chest. But, as life would have it, the peace didn't last long. One rainy afternoon, as I sat at my kitchen table going over some notes for a meeting, the phone rang again. It was an unknown number I almost didn't pick up. Something inside me told me to answer. "Hello?" I said, cautiously. "James?" a familiar voice asked, shaky and unsure. I froze. It was Derek Bennett, the CEO who had called me old and lazy before tossing me aside like yesterday's garbage. For a second, I didn't know what to say. I stared at the raindrops sliding down the window, feeling the old anger bubble under my skin, but I kept my voice steady. "Speaking," I said flatly. There was a long pause. I wasn't sure you'd answer," he mumbled. "Clearly," I said. He cleared his throat. I wanted to talk to you about something important." I waited. If he thought I was going to make it easy for him, he clearly hadn't learned much. After a few seconds of awkward silence, Derek finally spoke. We're in trouble, James." I almost laughed out loud. Trouble? The same man who replaced me with a young, energetic hotshot was now crawling back? I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers slowly on the table. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my tone cold. He hesitated, then said it. "Massive lawsuits, client losses, PR nightmares, employee walkouts. We've lost almost everything." I stayed silent, letting him squirm a little. "We need your help," Derek finally whispered. Hearing those words, after everything, was almost surreal. The man who humiliated me now begging for my help. Life had a funny way of turning tables. I thought about all the nights I'd gone to bed feeling worthless because of him. All the mornings I woke up dreading the emptiness his betrayal left behind. And now, he needed me. I took a deep breath, steadying the storm raging inside me. "What makes you think I'd ever help you, Derek?" I asked, my voice sharp. Another pause. "I made mistakes," he said, voice trembling. I see that now. I was wrong to treat you the way I did. I was wrong to think youth could replace experience. Wrong to think loyalty didn't matter." He sounded broken, but I wasn't sure if it was guilt or just desperation. "You didn't just fire me, Derek," I said quietly. "You erased me. You made me feel like I never mattered. Like 25 years of my life meant nothing." "I know," he whispered. I sat there, staring out at the grey sky, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to hang up, to tell him to fix his own mess. But another part of me, the part that still believed in righting wrongs, wrestled with the decision. After a few deep breaths, I spoke. "I'll think about it," I said. Before he could say anything else, I hung up. I needed time. Not because I was unsure about helping, but because I needed to decide why I would do it. Was it revenge? Was it pride? Or was it something bigger? I spent that night pacing my living room, replaying everything over and over. By sunrise, I had my answer. I wasn't going back to save Derek Bennett. I was going back for the people still left in that crumbling company. The employees who didn't deserve to lose their livelihoods because of someone else's arrogance. The clients who had trusted Bennett Industries with their dreams. The legacy that I had spent 25 years helping to build, even if they had forgotten. Sometimes, true revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you. It's about proving you were always bigger than the smallness that tried to break you. And that's exactly what I intended to do, on my terms. When I walked into Bennett Industries again after all those months, it didn't feel the same. The walls were the same dull grey, the receptionist desk still sat to the right, the elevator still made that little squeak right before closing, but something in the air was different. It was heavier, tense, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. As I passed by familiar faces, I saw it in their eyes. Shame, sadness, desperation. Some employees nodded at me with weak smiles. Others looked away, embarrassed. I could feel it in their body language. They all knew what had happened to me, and now they saw me as a ghost of everything the company used to stand for. Derek was waiting for me outside the boardroom, looking like a shell of the arrogant man who once fired me without a second thought. His suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked. There were dark circles under his eyes. "James," he said, trying to force a smile. I didn't return it. "Let's get this over with," I said, coolly. Inside the boardroom, the leadership team sat around the big oval table, faces pale, eyes sunken. Young executives who thought they knew everything about business, but forgot about loyalty, trust, and wisdom. Derek cleared his throat. "I've asked James here because we need help fixing the mess we created." He couldn't even meet my eyes when he said it. Good, I thought. He should feel ashamed. One of the board members, a woman named Claire, whom I remembered from back in the day, leaned forward. "James, we know we don't deserve your help, but we're begging you. If you can help us stabilize even a fraction of what we lost, we'll make it worth your while." Her voice cracked at the end. For a second, I said nothing. I let the silence hang heavy in the room. I wanted them to sit in the discomfort, to feel the weight of every bad decision they had made. Then slowly I placed my hands on the table and leaned forward. "I'm not here for you," I said, voice calm but firm. "I'm here for the employees who gave you their loyalty, for the clients who trusted you, and for the years of my life you tossed aside like they were nothing." No one dared to speak. I continued. "I'll help rebuild this company, but I'm doing it my way. No interference, no cutting corners, no disrespect." Derek nodded quickly. "Of course, James, whatever you need." I looked him straight in the eyes. "And when it's done, I'll walk away. No contracts, no handshakes, no fake promises." He swallowed hard and nodded again. That was the deal. Over the next few weeks, I poured every ounce of my energy into saving what was left. I worked long hours, sometimes sleeping in the office. I restructured teams, cut dead weight, personally reached out to old clients to rebuild the trust they had lost. It wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to quit, to let the company rot like it deserved. But every time I felt that bitterness creep in, I thought about the innocent people, the ones who hadn't wronged me, who would lose everything if I walked away. They deserved better. So I kept pushing. Day after day, night after night, I became a man on a mission, not for vengeance anymore, but for justice. Slowly things started to change. Revenue began to trickle back in. Old clients returned. New ones showed interest. Employee morale improved. The company that had been on life support was breathing again. Barely, but breathing. And everyone knew why. Not because of Derek, not because of the young blood they had hired to replace me, but because of the man they called old and lazy, the man they had thrown away, the man who refused to stay broken, James Carter, me. But I wasn't doing it for applause. I wasn't doing it to be a hero. I was doing it to prove, but mostly to myself, that their cruelty didn't define my worth, that no matter how small they tried to make me feel, I was always bigger than their lies. I was still somebody. And deep down, I think they all knew it, even if they never said it out loud. Especially Derek. He couldn't even look me in the eye most days, and honestly, that was satisfaction enough. The day I finished my last project for Bennett Industries, the sun was setting behind the office buildings, casting a warm golden glow through the glass walls. It felt symbolic somehow, like the closing scene of a long, painful chapter in my life. I stood in the center of the office one last time, looking around at the people bustling about, fixing reports, answering phones, solving problems. People who still had jobs because of the work I had done. A few familiar faces came up to me, quietly shaking my hand, patting my back, whispering thank yous that seemed to carry more weight than the words themselves. I nodded, smiling gently. I didn't need a grand farewell. I didn't want a retirement party or a gold watch. I didn't want another fake speech from people who had once turned their backs on me. All I wanted was peace. Derek caught up to me by the elevators. He was out of breath, like he had run to catch me before I left. "James," he said, voice nervous, I just wanted to say thank you. You saved us." I stared at him, feeling strangely detached. There was a time when his approval would have meant the world to me. When I would have worked overtime, bent over backward just to hear those words. But now, they felt hollow. Too little, too late. "I didn't do it for you," I said simply. He nodded quickly, shame flashing across his face. I know, he mumbled. "Still, if you ever want a position here again, we'd be honored to have you, at any level, even executive." The offer hung in the air, desperate and clumsy. But I didn't even think about it. I just smiled, a real smile this time, one full of peace, not bitterness. "No thanks, Derek. I think I'm finally ready to live my life on my terms." And with that, I turned, stepped into the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of Derek standing there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The elevator hummed as it descended, and I felt lighter with every floor we passed. By the time I walked out into the evening air, I felt like a free man, truly free. Not tied to a company's empty promises. Not chained by someone else's opinion of my worth. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel scary. It felt wide open. I spent the next few weeks rediscovering parts of myself I had long forgotten. Simple things. Walking in the park, fishing by the lake, laughing with my brother over coffee. I realized that life had so much more to offer than just climbing a corporate ladder. One afternoon, while sitting by the lake with a fishing rod in my hands, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Claire, the board member who had been kind to me during the collapse. "Just wanted to let you know," the email read, "the company is stable now. You saved it. We'll never forget what you did." There was a second line after that. "I hope wherever life takes you next, you know you deserved so much better than how we treated you." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I closed my phone, smiled, and cast my fishing line into the water. Because for the first time, I didn't need anyone else's validation to know my worth. I already knew it. I had proven it, not just to them, but to myself. And that was the real victory. Not saving the company, not getting the apology, not even the respect they were now too late to offer. The real victory was reclaiming me. The man they had called old and lazy, the man they had tossed aside, the man who refused to stay broken, James Carter, still standing, still strong, and finally, free. A few months later, I found myself walking through the very downtown streets where I used to rush to work every morning. But now, I wasn't in a hurry. I wasn't stressed about deadlines or late meetings. I was just living. I had grown my hair out a bit, grown a beard too, not because I was trying to change who I was, but because I finally had the time to figure out what I liked. It's funny how much we lose ourselves when we spend decades trying to fit into someone else's expectations. One evening, I passed by the old headquarters of Bennett Industries. The building stood tall and cold, just like it always had. But this time, it didn't intimidate me. It didn't make me feel small. It just looked like another building, brick, glass, steel. Nothing more. I stood across the street, hands tucked in my jacket pockets, and watched the busy employees come and go through the revolving doors. Young faces, tired faces, stressed faces. And somewhere up there, I knew Derek was probably pacing his office, barking orders, trying to squeeze productivity out of people who were quietly losing themselves the way I once had. I said a quiet prayer for them. Not because I hated the company, not even because I pitied them, but because I understood them. That was satisfaction enough. The day I finished my last project for Bennett Industries, the sun was setting behind the office buildings, casting a warm golden glow through the glass walls. It felt symbolic somehow, like the closing scene of a long, painful chapter in my life. I stood in the center of the office one last time, looking around at the people bustling about, fixing reports, answering phones, solving problems. People who still had jobs because of the work I had done. A few familiar faces came up to me, quietly shaking my hand, patting my back, whispering thank yous that seemed to carry more weight than the words themselves. I nodded, smiling gently. I didn't need a grand farewell. I didn't want a retirement party or a gold watch. I didn't want another fake speech from people who had once turned their backs on me. All I wanted was peace. Derek caught up to me by the elevators. He was out of breath, like he had run to catch me before I left. "James," he said, voice nervous, I just wanted to say thank you. You saved us." I stared at him, feeling strangely detached. There was a time when his approval would have meant the world to me. When I would have worked overtime, bent over backward just to hear those words. But now, they felt hollow. Too little, too late. "I didn't do it for you," I said simply. He nodded quickly, shame flashing across his face. I know, he mumbled. "Still, if you ever want a position here again, we'd be honored to have you, at any level, even executive." The offer hung in the air, desperate and clumsy. But I didn't even think about it. I just smiled, a real smile this time, one full of peace, not bitterness. "No thanks, Derek. I think I'm finally ready to live my life on my terms." And with that, I turned, stepped into the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of Derek standing there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The elevator hummed as it descended, and I felt lighter with every floor we passed. By the time I walked out into the evening air, I felt like a free man, truly free. Not tied to a company's empty promises. Not chained by someone else's opinion of my worth. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel scary. It felt wide open. I spent the next few weeks rediscovering parts of myself I had long forgotten. Simple things. Walking in the park, fishing by the lake, laughing with my brother over coffee. I realized that life had so much more to offer than just climbing a corporate ladder. One afternoon, while sitting by the lake with a fishing rod in my hands, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Claire, the board member who had been kind to me during the collapse. "Just wanted to let you know," the email read, "the company is stable now. You saved it. We'll never forget what you did." There was a second line after that. "I hope wherever life takes you next, you know you deserved so much better than how we treated you." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I closed my phone, smiled, and cast my fishing line into the water. Because for the first time, I didn't need anyone else's validation to know my worth. I already knew it. I had proven it, not just to them, but to myself. And that was the real victory. Not saving the company, not getting the apology, not even the respect they were now too late to offer. The real victory was reclaiming me. The man they had called old and lazy, the man they had tossed aside, the man who refused to stay broken, James Carter, still standing, still strong, and finally, free. A few months later, I found myself walking through the very downtown streets where I used to rush to work every morning. But now, I wasn't in a hurry. I wasn't stressed about deadlines or late meetings. I was just living. I had grown my hair out a bit, grown a beard too, not because I was trying to change who I was, but because I finally had the time to figure out what I liked. It's funny how much we lose ourselves when we spend decades trying to fit into someone else's expectations. One evening, I passed by the old headquarters of Bennett Industries. The building stood tall and cold, just like it always had. But this time, it didn't intimidate me. It didn't make me feel small. It just looked like another building, brick, glass, steel. Nothing more. I stood across the street, hands tucked in my jacket pockets, and watched the busy employees come and go through the revolving doors. Young faces, tired faces, stressed faces. And somewhere up there, I knew Derek was probably pacing his office, barking orders, trying to squeeze productivity out of people who were quietly losing themselves the way I once had. I said a quiet prayer for them. Not because I hated the company, not even because I pitied them, but because I understood them. That was satisfaction enough. The day I finished my last project for Bennett Industries, the sun was setting behind the office buildings, casting a warm golden glow through the glass walls. It felt symbolic somehow, like the closing scene of a long, painful chapter in my life. I stood in the center of the office one last time, looking around at the people bustling about, fixing reports, answering phones, solving problems. People who still had jobs because of the work I had done. A few familiar faces came up to me, quietly shaking my hand, patting my back, whispering thank yous that seemed to carry more weight than the words themselves. I nodded, smiling gently. I didn't need a grand farewell. I didn't want a retirement party or a gold watch. I didn't want another fake speech from people who had once turned their backs on me. All I wanted was peace. Derek caught up to me by the elevators. He was out of breath, like he had run to catch me before I left. "James," he said, voice nervous, I just wanted to say thank you. You saved us." I stared at him, feeling strangely detached. There was a time when his approval would have meant the world to me. When I would have worked overtime, bent over backward just to hear those words. But now, they felt hollow. Too little, too late. "I didn't do it for you," I said simply. He nodded quickly, shame flashing across his face. I know, he mumbled. "Still, if you ever want a position here again, we'd be honored to have you, at any level, even executive." The offer hung in the air, desperate and clumsy. But I didn't even think about it. I just smiled, a real smile this time, one full of peace, not bitterness. "No thanks, Derek. I think I'm finally ready to live my life on my terms." And with that, I turned, stepped into the elevator, and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of Derek standing there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The elevator hummed as it descended, and I felt lighter with every floor we passed. By the time I walked out into the evening air, I felt like a free man, truly free. Not tied to a company's empty promises. Not chained by someone else's opinion of my worth. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel scary. It felt wide open. I spent the next few weeks rediscovering parts of myself I had long forgotten. Simple things. Walking in the park, fishing by the lake, laughing with my brother over coffee. I realized that life had so much more to offer than just climbing a corporate ladder. One afternoon, while sitting by the lake with a fishing rod in my hands, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Claire, the board member who had been kind to me during the collapse. "Just wanted to let you know," the email read, "the company is stable now. You saved it. We'll never forget what you did." There was a second line after that. "I hope wherever life takes you next, you know you deserved so much better than how we treated you. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I closed my phone, smiled, and cast my fishing line into the water. Because for the first time, I didn't need anyone else's validation to know my worth. I already knew it. I had proven it, not just to them, but to myself. And that was the real victory. Not saving the company, not getting the apology, not even the respect they were now too late to offer. The real victory was reclaiming me. The man they had called old and lazy, the man they had tossed aside, the man who refused to stay broken, James Carter, still standing, still strong, and finally free. A few months later, I found myself walking through the very downtown streets where I used to rush to work every morning. But now, I wasn't in a hurry. I wasn't stressed about deadlines or late meetings. I was just living. I had grown my hair out a bit, grown a beard too, not because I was trying to change who I was, but because I finally had the time to figure out what I liked. It's funny how much we lose ourselves when we spend decades trying to fit into someone else's expectations. One evening, I passed by the old headquarters of Bennett Industries. The building stood tall and cold, just like it always had. But this time, it didn't intimidate me. It didn't make me feel small. It just looked like another building, brick, glass, steel. Nothing more. I stood across the street, hands tucked in my jacket pockets, and watched the busy employees come and go through the revolving doors. Young faces, tired faces, stressed faces. And somewhere up there, I knew Derek was probably pacing his office, barking orders, trying to squeeze productivity out of people who were quietly losing themselves the way I once had. I said a quiet prayer for them. Not because I hated the company, not even because I pitied them, but because I understood them. I understood what it felt like to give everything you had and be discarded the moment you were no longer useful. I turned away from the building, feeling no anger, no sadness. Just peace. My life wasn't tied to that place anymore. I had started doing consultancy work on my own terms, choosing the companies I wanted to help, setting my own hours, making enough to live comfortably without selling my soul. More importantly, I was spending time with my family. With my brother, who had stood by me when everyone else disappeared. With my nieces and nephews who thought I was the coolest uncle, because I actually showed up to their soccer games and school plays. With old friends I had reconnected with, laughing over silly memories we hadn't talked about in years. I even started mentoring young professionals. People just starting their careers, people who reminded me of myself all those years ago. I taught them the things no CEO would ever teach. That your worth isn't tied to your title, that loyalty is a gift, not an obligation, that self-respect is worth more than any promotion. And slowly, I built a new life, one built on purpose, not fear. One where I woke up every morning feeling grateful, not trapped. There were days when the old wounds ached, moments when bitterness tried to creep back in, but I always chose to let it go because carrying anger only weighed me down. And I had finally learned I was meant to rise. One night, as I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, the stars stretching endlessly above me, I realized something. Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It didn't feel like it at the time. It felt like betrayal, like heartbreak. But in losing everything I thought I needed, I found everything I truly wanted: freedom, peace, self-respect, a life I didn't have to beg anyone to let me live. As I sat there, the cool night air brushing against my face, I whispered a quiet thank you to the universe. Thank you for the pain. Thank you for the lessons. Thank you for setting me free. And then I smiled to myself, a real full smile, because I knew I was no longer the man they had called too old or too lazy. I was James Carter, and I had finally come home to myself.